Hey, this is the video lesson for Algebra 1, Section 1.1, Variables and Expressions. So the objective here is to write algebraic expressions. So an algebraic expression is going to be, or let's start with numeric expression. A numeric expression is just an expression with numbers, like 2 plus 3, which you've been seeing a lot of your math career, right? An algebraic expression is one that has variables. So something like 2x plus 3. Right, so this would be numerical and this would be algebraic. And here are the definitions here in your notes. An algebraic expression is a mathematical phrase that includes one or more variables. You know, anything like even ones like 3yz cubed plus 9x, anything that includes one or more variables. And then numerical is just a mathematical phrase involving numbers and operational symbols, but no variables. You know, anything like 2 times 4 plus 1 divided by 3. That's a numerical expression. Okay, and then a variable, I guess we've been talking about it, but it's just a symbol, usually a letter that represents a quantity or of a variable. Okay, so these are words that we're going to write as algebraic expressions. So this first one says 32 more than a number n. And so what we're going to be doing now is just turning words into expressions. So when we say 32 more than a number n, that's going to be 32 plus n, or n plus 32. That's going to be an expression for these words. Okay? And then this is the only ones that are confusing is this less than or less. 58 less than a number n, right, means that you have n first, and then you have 58 less than that. So a lot of times students write, right, you see the 58 first, and then you say, oh, less than means minus n, right? This is going to be wrong, right, because that's 58 minus n. That's n less than 58. So don't write that, right? Don't necessarily pay attention to the order, but think about what it means, right? 58 less than a number is going to be, you have a number n, and then you subtract 58 from it, okay? Here is another question. What is the algebraic expression for the following? Why don't you try these ones on your own? Press pause. And then see if you can figure out what that one's going to be, and then see if you can figure out what that one's going to be, and then once you have your answers, check back, push play, and then I'll give you the solution so you can check the solution. Okay, press pause. Okay, so here's the answer to this one, 18 more than a number n. Okay, and then I wanted you to think about this one. This says 8 times a number n. So normally we might think, right, we're just at the beginning of algebra here. So 8 times. Remember, we use x as multiplying in middle school and in elementary school. But in algebra, remember, we have x as a variable a lot of times. So we move away from using x for times. And sometimes you see it as a dot. Other times, I'm missing one here, 8, and then parentheses. These are all the same ways of saying times. But this is the most typical in algebra. So I want you to start using this one. 8 times n is just 8n. That means 8 times n. So there's not a marker here. There's not an operation here. So that's really big in algebra, learning that, right? You don't want to have the x because you're going to misinterpret that as a variable. The dot is unnecessary. The parentheses are sometimes necessary with the minus. But if they're both just positive, 8n would be 8 times the number n. Okay. And then quotient is going to be dividing, right? Quotient means dividing, okay? And we don't really use that often, but quotient of a number n and 5. So when you write, the first one is the one on top of the quotient. That means n divided by 5. Quotient of n and 5. So if I said 5 and n, it would be opposite. But in algebra, we don't really use this divide sign a lot. Okay, so what you're going to see it now is it's going to be written as a fraction, n divided by 5. So where before you were learning fractions, this is fractions mean divide, right? N divided by 5. So this is how you're going to see it. This is what I want you to get in algebra, to be writing it like this. I don't really want to see a lot of divide signs. In the beginning, That's fine if that's what you're used to, but I really want to move to this, fractions for divide, quotients. Okay, so why don't you, here's some more for you to try on your own. Press pause and try this one. 6 times the number n, the quotient of 18 and a number n, and then think about this question here. Do the phrases 6 less than a number y and 6 less than a number y mean the same thing? And we'll talk about this. So press pause, try these 3, and then check back for the solution. Okay, so this first one, hopefully you just wrote 6n. 6 times the number n. This is the what I want you to get for algebra, just 6n. If you wrote the x for the times or the dot, that's fine, or the parentheses, that's fine. But 6n is what I want to get to. And then quotient of 18 in a number n. 18 was written first, so it goes on top, and it was written second, so it goes on bottom. And hopefully you didn't write the divide sign, you just used this as your divide sign as a fraction. 18 divided by n. Okay, and then C, this is where the English gets a little bit tricky, and this just doesn't come up that much, but I would just want you to know, just think about these things. 6 less a number y means you have 6, and then you're going to subtract y from it. 6 less a number y. But then 6 less than a number y means you have a number y, and then you subtract 6. So be careful with this. It doesn't come up a lot, but just make sure you're thinking about this when you're doing this and don't rush through. Okay, so those are all just one operation expressions. So we're going to move on to 2 operation expressions. This one says 3 more than twice a number x. So we're going to split this up here, right? This is more than means plus, this is 3, and then twice a number x means 2x, right? 2 times x, where we just write as 2x. So this means 2x plus 3. And I just write the x in front, because the x term in front, because it's usually standard form, but 3 plus 2x would also work. And that's the order that they gave it, so that's fine, either one. Because of the commutative property of addition, you can write them either way. Right, that's the same as like 1 plus 2 is the same as 2 plus 1, right? It doesn't matter which order you add things in, you still get the same number. Okay, and here's another one. 9 less than the quotient of 6 and the number x. So this one's a little tricky, right, because of the less than. So that means we're subtracting 9 less than. That means that we're going to be subtracting 9. And then the quotient of 6 and a number x, remember, is 6 over x. So since it's 9 less than this, we're starting with this 6 over x, and then we're less than 9 less than. So we're subtracting 9. Okay, and then we have the product of 4 and the sum of the number x and 7 and 7, x and 7. So the sum of a number x and 7 is x plus 7. And this is the product, so we're multiplying these two things together, of 4 and, that means we're multiplying these two things. And so to multiply these two things, since this is a sum, this needs to be in parentheses because it's product of 4 and this. And then you can put these next to each other, 4 times x plus 7. That's what this is saying. Okay, right, the product, you might think plus, but look what happens here. If you put that x there, you get confused between this x and that x. So don't write that x. You can put a dot, but that's just excessive. Right, this is 4. This is the answer, just 4 times x to the x plus 7. And be careful here, the x plus 7 has to be in parentheses because you don't want to just write this as 4 times x plus 7 right next to each other. That's a totally different thing because now the 4 is only being multiplied by this x and not the 7 here. So make sure you don't forget your parentheses. That's something I see a lot of mistakes on. So careful with that. Okay, because 4 is being multiplied by both, is multiplying this whole thing, not just the x. Okay, so I want you to try these on your own. Press pause, write these out in your notes, and then check back for the solution. Okay, so you really had to think through some of these. They're a little bit trickier ones, so there's 2 operations here. 8 less than, that means 8 is going to be subtracted at the end of this something, which is the product of x and 4. So the product of x and 4 is written as 4x. When you subtract 8 from that. This is 8 less than the product of 4 and x. Twice the sum of x plus 8. So we have x plus 8, that's the sum. And then we have twice that. So it's 2 times that, and we need to put that in parentheses. And then the quotient of 5. So that quotient, that means 5 goes on top, and the sum of 12 and x go on the bottom. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in parentheses here for this, but I do, you could also have just written it like this. Because with grouping, when you do put that divide sign there, that this means this is grouped. So you don't necessarily need those parentheses, but it's best to just put them on, right? And if you did write this with a divide, which I don't want you to do, but if you did, it would be 5 divided by 12, sum of 12 plus x. This would have to be in parentheses if you wrote it this way, because if you write it like this, that means that you do this first, and we'll talk about that. But so you should just have written it like this. Okay, last page. So now we're going to go from the expression to the words. And so a lot of times too, just double check. I'm assuming, the book is assuming that you know that product is multiply. I shouldn't be using the x when I'm telling you not to use the x, right? Product is multiply. Sum means add. Difference is subtract. And you'll see that show up as like less than or less. That's a subtract. And then quotient is divide. Okay, so with that in mind, remember when we see a number next to a variable, that means you're multiplying. Okay, and also just a side note too, I've also seen people get confused. Like the number 32, that's not 3 times 2, right? That's the number 32. So if you do write numbers that are multiplied, that's where you use the dot, 3 times 2, right? Because if you did just put them next to each other, it would look like 32. So be careful. There's just little details like that you want to know the difference of, right? If you're doing, and you don't want to do 3 times 2 because then it looks like 3 times x times 2. Okay, so try not to use that. If you're doing 2 numbers multiplied, you use the dot. Okay, anyway, just a side note. So here, this is 3 times x, and so we can just write that, 3 times a number x. All right, since that was when they're next to each other, product multiply, next to, or a dot. Okay, and so here we have adding, so that's the word sum. So the sum of a number x and 8. Here we have 2 things going on. So this is the sum of 10 times a number x and 9. So just be careful how you write these, okay? The sum of 2 things, one thing and the other thing. One thing is 10 times x, and the other thing is 9. Oops, you don't have to write the word 9 and 9. And you can put in the words a number x. But I won't take off for that if that's on a test somewhere. Okay, this is going to be, see this, it should be written, I don't like that to the side. It should be like that, n over 3. So this is going to be, we're dividing, so this is quotient. The quotient of n and 3, since n is on top, n goes first. And then do I have any other colors? 1, 2, 3. Oh, yellow. Use yellow. Okay, and this is 2 things, difference, or we can do less than. Let's use our less than. So we're going to start with what we're less than. 1 less than 5 times x. Okay, and that's it. Enjoy.